Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining us again today. I have an unbelievable lady joining me on the Intentional Encourager podcast. She has her own business. She is a legal Shield Director. And so we'll get into that, how she's helping folks all over the place protect themselves and get access to legal products and things like that. They don't have to have an attorney for it. So she does that. But she has got a powerful story that I wanted to share with you today. And she is joining me from, this is how great this is. I'm in Barboursville, West Virginia. She is in Hartford, Connecticut. And she says to me before we start recording, "You have a wonderfully thick accent." I do not apologize one bit for it. Lisa Jameson joins me today on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Lisa, how are you today? Are you enamored with the accent, or does it turn you off a little bit?
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Most people don't know what to do with the West Virginia accent. They're like,
no. I've heard that accent, of course, many times, and I like it. I have a brother-in-law who lives in Florida, and his accent's even thicker than yours.
You know something, that's where people here in West Virginia, you either go to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, or you go to Florida. So it's probably, there's a confluence there of some kind. Yeah. But I am so glad you're joining me today on the Intentional Encourager podcast. We're going to get through the linguistics here, and I can't even say that right. Linguistics. Okay, let's. Just roll with it. Lisa, I got to start here with you real quick. What you do is so important in helping people, especially, as things in a pandemic have gone, a lot of things that we have to do, we've not been able to do because some places in the country, things have been shut down for a long period of time. Things that we would normally take for granted, we can't do. What have you seen in the last year around your business that has been one of those aha moments? Like, I didn't realize we were doing this to help people.
Well, I mean, I do realize to the full extent how we help people. But the one thing that has happened for Legal Shield is the fact that it's like doing an enormous amount of work. It is, our clientele has just risen exponentially because, we are able to help people get a will. And that is one of the most major things right now, because so many people are dying from the COVID that they're realizing they need to get their wills done. So they're finding out about Legal Shield because all of us associates are doing our best to get that word out there, so that people know that they have that option without having to pay $1,200 or whatever.
Were you surprised? I got to ask you this. Were you surprised at the number of people that suddenly found themselves maybe not having? Because for my wife and I, we'll be married 25 years this year. That was the one thing that when we first got married, she said, we are going to get a will done. My parents did not have a will. So when my dad passed away, it was, and I've been pushing my mom, you got to get one done. And this COVID thing, this pandemic has pushed people, for lack of a better term, kicking and screaming to have to do those things. Were you surprised at the number of people that did not have those things in place that reached out to you?
Yes and no. I mean, I know that about 70% of the population don't have a will. So I'm not surprised about that. I'm not surprised about that. But yes, I am a little bit more surprised that more people have, come to me and other associates too, that it's grown so exponentially. One thing that's great is we don't have to get out there and meet people in person. We're able to do everything. Legal Shield was prepared to do everything online, which was great. there was no hiccups at all in this business. And it's just one of those businesses that has grown.
That's a stunning statistic to me, because it floors me that 70% of the United States population does not have a will, their last will and testament. Because I can remember, and again, Lisa, I'll share something with you from a personal experience. When my dad died suddenly. Again, a lot like people that are doing with COVID-19. They're going in the hospital, and it's deteriorating rapidly for them. Now, thank God, millions have had it. They've recovered. We're grateful for that. But when my dad passed away suddenly, we had no idea, what he wanted for a funeral. My dad was very averse to talking about stuff like that. He thought he was going to live a long time, but we were just so unprepared for that finality of, and then having to get a death certificate and do that. And I don't want to be morbid or park here. To me, when you're talking about that, I'm thinking back in my mind to 8 years ago of all the difficult things that my family and I had to do, that had we been more prepared, it would have been a lot easier to execute. Why do you think people are not prepared as well as they should be? In your experience, what are you seeing as the lack of preparation in people that, because again, 70% don't have a will. Why is that?
Well, we were guilty of that until about 5 years ago, when I found out about Legal Shield. But a lot of it has to do with the cost, I believe, because usually a will, if you want to get a really good will, it's going to cost you $1,200. And if you have a child or children with disabilities, it's going to cost you more like $2,400 to get a will. And with us, if our plan covers a whole family, and the fact is both parents can get a will, and a year's membership only comes to just over $300. It's a no-brainer.
Lisa, I got to share something with you. I have a 20-year-old son, and he comes to me one day. This is my son has, in a lot of ways, he has my sense of humor. He comes to me one day, comes to me in the kitchen. He puts his arm around me. He says, "Dad." I said, "Yeah." He said, "I wish you a long, happy, and prosperous life until August 12th, 2042. And I said, "August 12th, 2042. He said, "Yeah, August 12th, 2042. He said, "That's the day before you turn 70. And Mom told me your life insurance decreases the day you turn 70. Your life insurance goes down in value." He said, "So I just want you to live a long and prosperous life until then." Because he knew he was going to be the recipient he was going to be a beneficiary at my death if something happened. So he was preparing, like, "You know what, Dad, I want to spend a lot of time with you. I hope you're well until that day. And when that day comes, you just go peacefully. You just run to the light, Dad. Just run to the light." So, but no, yeah, kids, they're nothing like him. But, Lisa, that's a great point. A lot of people have found themselves, and you would think in this information age that we're in, you would think it would be so easy to find out how to get these things and do these things. And what you gave me was that startling statistic. I'm still wrapping my mind around that concept and that thought process. When you end up connecting with clients, I've got to go here for just a minute. When you end up connecting with clients and they find that out and they reach out to you and go, "This happened to a neighbor of mine," or this, what's the typical reason that ends up pushing people to get this done? Is it that they find themselves caught short, or is it they know someone that got caught short? What do they tell you as the impetus for why they reach out?
They really don't say. They just say that I need to get my will done. But, I've also heard a lot of people, more than not, say, "I really need to get my will done." And then that's it. They don't do it. I have customers that have it. And I'm constantly talking to them, get your will done, get your will done. And they're not doing it, some of these people. And it's frustrating because they say, well, I don't have any time. I just don't understand having no time at all, because you do. And I don't care who you are. You have time to do your will, because when you're dead, you won't have time. And, they should be thinking of it as last love letter to their family, because they are actually preparing their family to, be able to, do what they need to do. They're not going to be guessing at what they have to do. If something happens to somebody and they can't speak for themselves, they need a will with a healthcare power of attorney, and we do it all. And it's so important. And, and this is going to be a little bit in my story as well, just a little bit, because of one of the things that happened in my story. But yeah, and it doesn't matter how young you are, you definitely need a will.
Well, and I love what you said there. There's two things I want to park around real quick. Is people being moved to action, but not taking action. They see the need, and I've been in sales a long time, so it's sales. A lot of people say, well, it's getting people to need what they want, and a lot of times people go, I know I need to do this, but there's a difference in being moved to action and taking action. And you said it so beautifully. It's the last love letter that you can send to your family that tells them this is what I would like to see carried out. I would like to do this. If you can, I'm just curious about something, and you may not be able to share it or not. What was the most unusual thing that you saw in a person's will? If you can share it. If you can't, no worries.
I don't see their will. I'm not an attorney.
Okay. Because I have in my will, I told my wife, I said, one of my wishes at my funeral is that when the service is over and everything's said and done, because I like food and fellowship, I tell people when they close the casket, just throw a tablecloth over it, put some chafing dishes out, and everybody can have dinner on me. That's my last love letter to my friends and family. Eat, drink non-alcoholic beverages like iced tea and Coke Zero and things like that. Eat, drink, and be merry, and tell good stories about me. Let's step aside and take a quick break. Back in a moment here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Hey everybody, Brian Sexton here. I want to tell you about our sponsor, SEO National. SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. Now, what's that, you might say? Well, Search Engine Optimization helps you show up higher on search engines in front of paying customers for words that you as a business owner can monetize. What a great concept. SEO National is owned by my good buddy Damon Burton, who's been a guest here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Not only has Damon and his team worked with businesses of all sizes, from e-commerce startups to NBA teams and Shark Tank featured businesses, but more importantly, Damon and his team are about transparency, trust, and providing lifetime value. So much so that he still has his first customers after opening SEO National 14 years ago. Let me give you some intentional encouragement and call Damon and his team today at 855-736-6285 or go to www.seonational.com and get a free quote.
You got a break?
Yeah, back on the Intentional Encourager podcast here with Lisa Jameson. And we had a moment of levity. So we're having a moment of levity, and then Lisa's going to get into her extremely riveting story for you guys. And so, again, forgive me for being a little silly there, Lisa. I apologize, but
it reminded me of a funny joke.
Please go. Yes, we enjoy. Go ahead, Lisa. The floor is yours. Anytime you have a joke to bring to the Intentional Encourager podcast, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
What did Mozart do before he was a composer?
What
Or
did
after he was a composer? No.
what did
Sorry.
Mozart do after he was a composer? I give up.
That fast? Okay.
Oh
he,
my God.
He decomposed.
He did.
I said that wrong. What did Mozart do after he died? That's what I meant to say.
What did Mozart? I'm writing this down. What did
Sorry.
Mozart do after he died? After he died, he decomposed. That is great. He decomposed. Yeah, absolutely.
I learned that so long ago. That's like 20 years ago.
Oh no, that was good, Lisa. I appreciate that. Thank you. No, that again, levity. And I say this, humor is a part of giving intentional encouragement because it opens the mind. When people laugh, they're more open to receive encouragement. And that's a beautiful thing. I love that. Thank you for doing that. Let's dive into your story. You have got you reached out to me and you said, Brian, I've got to tell my story. And I'm like, Lisa, this is the place for you to do it. I want to tell your story. So take us as far back as you want to take us into your incredibly powerful story.
Oh, boy, this this isn't going to be easy either. I want to tell a story about how my husband and I became Christians. Our son, who is now 41 years old, and he's married and he has 4 beautiful children that we absolutely love more than anything. But when he was in college, we were not believers. And I had seen so much hypocrisy in my life that it just wasn't funny. My mother, she had claimed to be a Christian, and she was far from it. And it just really turned me off. I mean, she was just ridiculous. But in college, my son met this girl that was absolutely amazing. And her name was Candace. I'm not going to say any last names, but her name was Candace. And he went to college in Maine. He went to UMF, and he met her, I believe it was his 3rd year out of 5, because he changed his major in the last year. So he was there an extra year. But oh my gosh, they got married. They ended up getting married in July 10th of 2004. Okay. January 10th of 2005, she was killed in a car accident. And it was really, really hard because, my husband and I loved her so much. And she displayed Christianity like you just wouldn't believe. She was just she was bubbly, fun to be with, funny.
Lisa, was that the first time in your life? Because I've been in a similar situation. My dad died suddenly. Was that the first time in your life that you or your family had ever had a sudden loss like that? It is so jarring when you get that phone call. Was that the first time you had been through something like that?
Like that, yes.
It's happened to me twice. The guy was my best man in my wedding, died of a pulmonary embolism. My father, my cousin, I had a cousin that died suddenly of a heart issue, and my father died. But it was more jarring when it's that personal, when it's a father, mother, sister, brother, daughter-in-law, son-in-law, something like that. It's absolutely jarring. Take me through the emotions of that day, getting the phone call that you got. Where were you? What was going through your mind at that time?
I was here at home, and I was getting ready to go to an appointment. And this was, of course, January 10th of 2005. And it was my son. And he said, "Mom, Candace has been in an accident." And I said, "Is she going to be okay?" He said, "I don't know, but I need you to come." So,
and let me bring some perspective there, if I can. And I don't mean to interrupt you. When your kids hurt, when your
yes,
kids are going through something like that, it jars your world, because I saw how my adult parents loved me through some things that jarred. Nothing like that. Let me be very clear. But I have seen my parents, how they loved me as their adult child. And now he's saying to you, "Mom, I need you to come." I cannot imagine a mother, and you try to explain, fathers like myself, we don't carry babies for 9 months like moms carry babies for 9 months. Your baby boy reaches out to you. Take me through what you're thinking at that moment. Are you just trying to get your things together and get to him? Is that kind of where you were at in that point in your process?
yes, my husband was at work, and I worked too full time, but I was on family medical leave because of my other son, which is another whole story. But a lot of that happened at the same time, which was even worse. But I called my husband at work. They, mind you, Scott, my son Scott, was in Maine, and that was a 4.5 at that time, about 4.5 hours a trip. And so my husband he came barreling home. He got home in 20 minutes, and it usually takes a little longer. Meanwhile, I packed 2 sets of clothes and the toiletries, and out the door we were. And we got there in 3 hours. Thank God we weren't stopped by a cop. But when we got there, I remember all the friends in the family were sitting downstairs in the room. We passed them going down the hall. And then we went into the room where, her family was, and of course, everybody's crying. And the doctor was talking to them at that time and telling us that she had no response in her brain, and that they were doing an apnea test to see if she would stop breathing, but they were waiting for her temperature. I can't remember if it was to rise or lower before they could do that. And this at the time was probably about 4:00 in the afternoon. And because this happened on her way to work. And so we did go and see her, and her body was all swollen. And, we went back, and her mother, had put her arm around my son and said, "Scott, there's no sense in keeping her alive." She was giving him permission to let them pull the plug if they needed to. And they did need to. So, I thought that was amazing, because that was around the time of the Terry Schiavo case. Just before the Terry Schiavo case. I don't know if you heard of it.
Yes.
So, he was very fortunate, because if she had lived, she would have been a vegetable, and it would have been unfair to my son. And it was just, unbelievable.
You saw in that moment, and I want to go here for just a second. You saw in that moment, you're the mother of her son-in-law. She's the mother of your daughter-in-law. And you being a mother, obviously full of empathy, just your heart's breaking, because you love this girl as your own.
Yep.
And you watch this interaction take place between your son and his mother-in-law. what went through your mind and through your heart at that moment, watching that, being a mother yourself and watching your son now going through this? Take me through that moment, because you mentioned that moment for a reason. I don't think you mentioned that moment if it wasn't poignant in what you saw in the story of what your son went through.
I thought it was so unconditional love, that she really cared about my son too. And she just got it, you know, she really got it. I mean, they were Christians too. We were new Christians, brand new. We had just accepted Christ just a few months before that. And it was just, I just thought it was amazing, you know, I mean, because her daughter was gone, you know, and she was able to think clearly enough to show my son that she really cared. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
It's
know
just,
exactly
it's
what you mean.
so. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Scott makes the decision. Scott, your son, makes the decision to go ahead and take his wife off life support. She passes away.
She was brain dead. So
Yeah, but again, making an incredibly tough decision. Take me through after that, what happened, because your son is newly married, been married a year.
no, 6 months to the day.
6 months to the day. Forgive me, 6 months to the day. Take me through the aftermath of that, of what happened after that with Scott.
Well, after that, we were there when he talked to the New England Donor Bank, and he had to make sure that that all of our organs get used, and that nothing be used for cosmetic reasons. And so going to the next day, he got a call at 6 o'clock in the morning, and he had to run to the hospital really quick because they had somebody for her heart. And so he went down there, and the aftermath is one of the biggest things. It's bittersweet, but something really wonderful happened in our life because of it as well. And God worked in so many different ways that we saw right away that I don't know if that many people do. Oh gosh, it's kind of hard. I'm getting emotional. But he had went to the hospital, and he had to sign some papers because they had somebody to take her heart. And when we first got to Maine, we stayed over at her aunt's house. But then Candace's parents knew somebody that were missionaries, and they were actually in China at the time, and they were selling their house in the town next door, and it was a huge house, and they offered it to us.
Wow.
They offered to have us stay there. And this house, it was a huge house. It was able to sleep 20 people because it was so big. And the house was, the name of the street was called Lord's Way. Maybe it's ridiculous, and at nighttime, when we would go back there was a little shack on the side of the road that had a light, just one light bulb. You know what I mean? Can you see what I mean?
Yeah. 100%.
And yes, and it was unbelievable. We were there for 4 or 5 nights, and all of Scott and Candace's friends came, the first morning we were there, the pastor at his church brought so much food that we just didn't know what to do with it all. It was amazing how everything happened. This was in Winthrop, Maine. And his friends, they took care of cleaning up, doing everything. We didn't have to do anything except to just take it easy and think and talk and, stuff like that. And they had brought sleeping bags for all of his friends. They had this huge, great room in the house, and all of his friends got to sleep there. We didn't have to worry about doing laundry. Like, we'll do everything for you. It was just like unbelievable. Yeah. And, over at her parents' house, restaurants were bringing them meals. And the night of her wake, or the afternoon or night of her wake, a couple of her friends, they drove people to the wake. Another one of her friends, her parents spent all day making food, and all family and close friends got to go to that house, eat dinner, and were driven back to the church. And then when we were doing the night session, somebody came up to me and says, "Is there anything that you need?" And I said, "Well, I don't think we have enough stuff for people to drink, because even more people are going to be coming and staying, people that came up from Connecticut." And so I that, and chips and stuff like that. Well, I'll tell you, when I got back to my truck, everything was there that we needed. And everything was just amazing. That whole entire town just came together and really helped out. And it was amazing. Even the person that she was in the accident with, who it was not anybody's fault, she slipped on black ice and got hit from an oncoming car. And it was nobody's fault. That other person was not hurt. He was 19, she was 22. And he's probably feeling guilty about that, even though it was not his fault. But his parents and him had sent flowers and a card. That poor kid. But more amazing is the events that followed that. Is what I'm, kind of what I'm leading up to. The thing about that was we were going to church in Bloomfield, Connecticut. We still are. Mm-hmm. Can't imagine going to church anywhere else. And I'm just trying to get my thoughts here.
Let's take a quick break, Lisa, and we'll come right back. Folks, you're going to want to stay tuned for the rest of this. Back in a moment on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Hey, everybody, Brian Sexton. Want to tell you about my new book, People Buy From People, 10 Powerful People Lessons from the Ultimate People Person. My dad was one of the greatest connectors that I ever knew. And he shared with me 10 connecting principles that I have used throughout my 25-year sales and sales management, customer engagement, and leadership career that I'm passing along to you. If you want to be a stronger, deeper, and more powerful connector, you've got to pick up a copy of People Buy From People. There are concepts in there that you may not realize help make you a power connector. You can go to Amazon and pick it up, Kindle if you're an e-reader and you like to do it that way, or now available on Audible. And there's one other way you can get a copy of People Buy From People. You can get one from me and I'll sign it for you. You go to intentionalmediaandpublishing@gmail.com and send me an email, and I'll share with you the link on how you can get a signed copy. You can buy a signed copy directly from me. Again, People Buy From People. If you want to connect like never before, pick up your copy today of People Buy From People. And now let's get back to more great conversation here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Back here on the Intentional Encourager podcast with Lisa Jameson, and she is just telling an unbelievably remarkable story about her son and the loss that he suffered and their family suffered 6 months after he had gotten married. And so when we Lisa, before we went to break, we talked about the church you were going to in Bloomfield, Connecticut, that you had just joined. You just became a part of that church in Bloomfield, Connecticut. Pick the story up from there and continue to tell this powerful story that you're telling.
Well, when Candace was still alive, my son went to that church. God, when he would come home for the summer, and he was in the church for several months, and he ended up just, not going back to that church because of the fact that he was getting married. He wanted to, be a part of planning the wedding, his wedding. And he's the one that introduced us to this church because, he went there. It was a great church. He loved it. And so that's the church that we went to. We liked it when we started going. And we were put into a life group there. And because they have a lot of life groups where people do Bible studies, stuff like that. And this particular group we had already joined, like maybe a month or two prior to that. And we'd meet once a week. And, so we really enjoyed it. We were doing actually John 13. That's where they were, when we were doing that. And the day of her wake, there were a couple of people that, came from Connecticut that went to the funeral. And it's just, oh my gosh, there's just so much that happened that I know I'm going to be telling it, getting mixed up with some things. I'm sorry about that, but it's a lot. The person whose house that we, did our small group at, his wife, who ended up not coming to the funeral because she had other things that she had to do. She called me earlier in the day and she said that, she wouldn't be able to come, but she told me that her sister, who lives in Maine, had been working with Candace's father for 30 years. What are the odds of that? Somebody in Connecticut who had a sister, when she found that out, she had to call me and tell me, hey, my sister worked with her dad for 30 years. Okay. So, her husband, Andy, came to the funeral and he brought his sister-in-law who worked with her father to the wake. And also another woman who was in our small group came to the wake and the funeral. And her son used to go to Wittenberry, but he was a missionary in Maine. And my son and his wife, even before they got married, were running the IVCE on campus, which is the Campus Christian thing. And they knew her son. They already knew her son. And he came, and they hadn't seen each other in a long time. All from one church. Okay. So this was just absolutely amazing, I thought. Plus, when we were in that house for those few days, one of the, his friends was telling me that she used to be a roommate of one of Scott's old girlfriends, believe it or not. And she met her husband online and they were married and everything. And, Scott, and Candace were in their wedding. And, she was telling me that,
so many connecting fibers there. It had to be mind blowing to you that there were just so many connecting fibers, because again, You know, I have to, in being a Christian a long time myself, you understand that God doesn't make a mistake. That was what my stepfather, now my stepfather, told me the day my dad died. And you can see God as you're telling the story. I can see the interweaving of you're 4 hours away. You live 4 hours away from where they were at. But yet there's so many connecting fibers that
Yes.
just interwoven together. Let's fast forward just a bit to after her passing, her wake, and things like that.
Okay.
How did
Those things are
how did your son recover? Because I don't know if you can ever recover from losing a spouse so early in a marriage, but take me to after everything happened with her wake and things like that. What was your son's life like after that?
well. He he continued to live in the apartment that they were in, and one day he started drinking. You know, he's a Christian, but he was by himself and a newlywed or newlywed widower, and he has got these two friends. Their name, they're these two girls that were absolute. I mean, they were really close. I mean, him and Candace were really close. They all met together. Candace lived with these other two girls while, you know, before they got married. And they used to come and spend the night once a week because they were just really close friends. Okay. So this night that he was drinking, the other two girls they're living together still. And he calls them up in the middle of the night and tells them that he's drunk and that he had been cutting himself. So one of them stayed on the phone with him while the other one got into a car and drove all the way to his apartment and, you know, to see if he was okay. And so, of course, you know, she brought him to the hospital. And when he was in the hospital, her Candace's aunt, who was actually younger than her, actually tried to commit suicide. They were in the hospital at the same time. She was a woman or a young girl that just captured the hearts of everyone. She was amazing, you know, and his wife now is absolutely amazing. As a matter of fact, his wife now is one of those two girls, the one that went to this apartment. And every time they would come, Scott would come here, he would bring them with him, plus another friend of his. And they would spend the weekend here. And he was not alone. After that incident, his in-laws took him in. And he lived there until the end of May when the lease ran up on his apartment. So he stayed with his in-laws. Now, another thing that happened too was that he and Candace had planned to go to Madagascar for missionary work. And this was actually the year that the movie Madagascar came out. Mm-hmm. But they ended up not going because of the fact that she died 5 days before they were endorsed to go on that trip. So everybody said, you know, maybe you should wait a year, you know, before you go. But he did go the following January for 6 months. And he brought some of her ashes because he had spent time with his family spreading ashes, and they all got some of her ashes. My son still has a little egg-shaped urn in the house. And, you know, and his wife now was one of her best friends. And he scattered her ashes in a waterfall because that's what she wanted. That's what she would have wanted because she had mentioned that to him. And she always wanted to go to Africa to do missionary work. So she did kind of get to go, but not alive. But But yeah, so he did go on that trip, and he did end up getting married again. And his wife's name is Rebecca, and they've been married now since August of '08, and they have just beautiful children. And but both my husband and I really feel that God put her into our lives to save us. And the things that happened after that were just amazing. Not just the fact that we started going to this church. There were other people that were involved from Connecticut to Maine. That was just unbelievable. The girl that I talked about before that met her husband online, and they were happily married, both Christians, and they were at that place that we were at. And this is what I was getting to before. The day on December 10th, that Scott and Candace were married for 5 months. And this friend of theirs, Donna, just happened to call Scott. And she was asking him how he was doing, and everything. And he's like in a great mood. And he's like really great. She goes, "What are you so happy about?" She goes, "Well, Candace and I have been married for 6 months today." And she said, "Scott, it hasn't been 6 months. It's only been 5. No, sir." She goes, "Yes, listen to me. July to August to September to October to November." Oh my God. He says, "Candace, it hasn't been 6 months. We've only been married 5 months." She goes, "What do you mean?" God must have put that in their heads, because they never got to celebrate their 6-month anniversary.
Wow.
Because she was in the hospital dying.
Wow.
So they celebrated it. They went to dinner. They were having a sip of champagne, and he bought her a dozen roses, and he was just, the whole thing. God knew.
Yeah, Lisa, we could go on for hours. We may have to pick up this at another time. I want you to share very quickly encouragement for somebody out there that may be going through an instance where they've lost someone. We talked about with COVID-19, the suddenness, the urgency of life. You know this intimately through your son. Share with the folks some intentional encouragement around if they're facing that particular situation, or it may be something that feels just like life has just been stripped away from them. Share some intentional encouragement for somebody out there that may be listening.
Things do eventually get better. It can take a long time, but God really does help. I don't know where we would be today if it weren't for God's love. It was so obvious, all the things that happened, that God was in this, and that she was meant to save us. And just trust him, and stay in his word, and pay attention to things that he does, because you will see them. He does leave signs, but you just have to look. You just have to pay attention.
Absolutely.
Because he certainly did that for us. It was so hard, and believe me, it was probably just as hard, but I think that it would have been worse if we weren't believers. And we had a whole church family there for us, and it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
Lisa, I am beyond grateful, beyond humbled and honored that you would share that story with us. We have to have you back soon because I know there's more, but again, the constraints of time,
Yeah.
I have to leave it here.
Yeah.
We will do another podcast where you tell more layers of the story, because again, it's very powerful. Again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for choosing to tell your story here to this audience. And what you have shown us today is that there is triumph that can come from tragedy. And let me leave you with this. If you're walking through something that is bigger than you, there is hope. That's why we do this podcast, is to bring as much intentional encouragement as we can. Lisa has just told you there is hope. There is encouragement. Tell folks how they can connect with you. I know people are going to want to connect with you once they hear your story. How can they connect with you and just talk with you if they're walking through this? I know you have a heart to help people. How can they connect with you and reach out to you?
Well, my email address is Lisa Jameson, and that's LISAJAMESON 22@gmail.com. And I don't know, should I give my phone number?
They can connect with you on LinkedIn. I think, that's where I connected with you. And again, if folks want to, message her on LinkedIn or send her an email, I'm sure she can give you her phone number so that you guys can connect personally. But again, Lisa, thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your story with us today on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on it. It was really nice of you.
My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And of course, the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through his word. If you enjoyed this episode, you'll enjoy all the other episodes of the Intentional Encourager podcast, releasing each Tuesday and Friday. You can get those by subscribing wherever you get podcasts. Until next time, remember, anyone at any time, any place can be an intentional encourager.